B-rolling an episode is an art, and I'm going to show you how I'm about to do it because I have already cut my narrative, and then I'm about to spend hours B-rolling it. So I think the best lesson here is for me to B-roll this 12-minute video in 1 to 2 minute segments, and then I will stop and I will turn this camera back on and I will explain to you the decisions I made. The goal would be that anybody I'm training on my team would be watching this video and then attempting to do it because I will save all the files from before I start editing to afterwards. And then you would, if you're doing this test or lesson, that you would take that raw stuff, try to do what I'm doing, and then compare what I did, and then go back and fix it. And you actually get like 6 to 12 lessons out of this one video, and it's very apples for apples because it's all the same video. And I think what'll be helpful is that any B-roll that I am using, that I inevitably use, is going to end up in this folder. So you have like, it's kind of a cheat sheet because like sometimes you have to make the B-roll, but I will have already made it. And I will have already made this spreadsheet that I will show you right here. This will, if I make any changes, be perfect by the time I hand it to you. And that's just the lesson of when and how to time showing what I'm saying. You got to listen to what I'm saying, and then you got to show it. And what's cool is here you have the script. This is just pre-thoughts, brain farts. The design of experiment is here. And this is word for word the script. And so you can read that. That's not going to change. So then we're going to slide over to here where the folder exists. You're going to have the B-roll I used, which I'm going to keep organized and have like some names here. The narration that I've already edited. So if I open this up, this is what, this is the same thing for now. You would essentially start typing over this or editing over this. And so I have it over there so I don't. But if I open this up, it is already spliced and diced. This is, while it was fresh in my mind, I said the whole thing. I said everything I wanted to say because I did my prep and script. So now this needs to be B-rolled, and that is probably what I would call version 2 or 3 in our editing versions. So read the script, review the spreadsheet so you know what you're looking at. You need to get familiar with the content at least a little bit. The narration will walk you through it. And then take a quick look by doing this on the B-roll used. Have an idea of what's available. So the 3 to 8 mil UTM, that's the vertical test, and reference the Premiere summary of this. So you would just kind of look at what's available here. But then I have this note, reference Premiere summary. So you would actually open this up, and you'll notice that offline all. You notice I already edited it. It's already here. The 3s, the 4s, the 5s, the 6s, and of course you can unclick that and eyeball it so you don't see this, or just delete it and don't copy this part over. So make sure you like really understand what you have to work with. The 60 centimeter, 9 to 10, these are not edited. That one's vertical, probably for vertical sake. You should probably take a look at that before you use it. But you just like, okay, the idea here is that these are all horizontal break tests, probably with a reaction. Snap, reaction, right? You don't have to watch them all. This one's vertical. You have to decide if that's usable. And there's a lot of like post thoughts. There's some things going on here. That's just the number. I might be like, wow, that's high, but like, you don't have to watch every raw video. B-roll unbroken samples. This is just the unbroken samples before I did anything. And that shows the eye, and this shows that. That just needs to be rotated. Okay, so you have some shots of AM steel. There is a rope length by diameter, so berry length. Okay, cool. This looks like it does not labeled. It looks like a Marlowe thing. I will label it. Marlowe strength chart. Now, a lot of this stuff you're going to probably have to go find yourself in the future, but not for this video. So we have cyclic loading on a big fat sling. That might be useful later if I talk about it. And this is POV. You probably want to watch that one, figure out what I'm saying. This is a lot of like, either I'm using the machine, breaking the machine. It looks like I'm pointing to the machine. It looks like I'm showing the machine. So here's some B-roll of the machine. Motors. Okay. B-roll. This is B-roll. It's also just in the general B-roll folder. Yep, showing the machine. And then time lapse. This is 100x. This is a 10-minute long in 1000x of me brake testing. All 120 centimeter slings. So don't show the ending with the wet die. Don't show this part because that's what the notes say. It's not relevant to the video. So now you understand what's in here. There probably will be more stuff when I'm done with this, but you will want to review B-roll used. So I'm going to write in the description how long you should be editing before you stop editing and you watch the next portion of this video. Stop right here, edit 1 to 2 minutes. That will be in the description of this video, and then watch the next segment of this, and I will explain to you the decisions that I made. So I am 2 minutes deep into this. Let me show you what I did.
This is a weird rope that I wanted to understand how strong it is.
Clearly, I want to leave that in there. I zoomed in on it.
We are working on a world record project right now.
That is a complete sentence. And I want to establish that I am in a room talking, and that's where the narrative is coming from, because I'm going to be coming back to that. You don't want to just cover that up yet.
Where we need several kilometers of this.
You need to show something that has several kilometers in the video.
They'll snake through the air as if gravity isn't real.
Tried really hard to find something that I could not find footage, but this is the other large project we did.
And the energy will go back and forth through it, where you feel it humping.
In order to make sure people understand the word humping, I had to move the thing back and forth, and it brings you back to the room. You want to sometimes come back to the room.
You feel it humping. We need to know precisely what this breaks at in a real world scenario.
See where I stopped there? In a real world scenario, there's a new thought coming.
And in the process of finding out, I learned 5 things about it.
That was another sentence. And so you can see that these sentences are the breakpoints. You have to be able to hear the breakpoints. But notice that's like the intro. We are 20 seconds into, that's the premise of the application of what we're going to do. I learned 5 things about it. But notice I raised the audio here.
So mini ropes have a sheet.
And so that's what makes this not feel like a dude talking in a room. You don't want to go to the audio somewhere else unless you're at a break point or something really good was said. Now, you'll notice this is essentially this copied over. And what I had to do is I had to delete the transition from the things I learned about it. First, let me tell you what I learned about it. Let me tell you what I know about it. I eliminated that transitional piece, but only the transitional piece. And I actually kept in the rest. So just look at how this rolls with what we already put in. 30,000 foot view, does it look good?
And then on the inside, they have a core that can look several different ways. Hollow 12 braid is 12 strands and hollow. And you can make the eye-to-eye splices that we're testing in this video, or you could splice it like this and turn it into a shackle, a soft shackle. They come in different qualities. This specific one right here is for the brake test machine, and it breaks at 143 kilonewtons, pulled eye to eye. And I have been using these for years, and they're in terrible shape, and they keep on working. This should be very technically, but this is some pretty durable stuff considering what I do to it. So the things we're specifically testing in this video is
Now, you can notice we talk about core sheath. That's hollow. I'm showing it, so there's no reason to do anything with it. Eye to eye, I showed that. Soft shackle, I showed it. This could use, so I just added this text because just showing you, you can't see quality, right?
a soft shackle. And they come in different qualities. This specific one right here is for the brake test machine,
added
and
text.
it breaks at 143 kilonewtons, pulled eye to eye. And
I left that on purpose so you can see I took it off the little tripod holder.
I have been using these for years, and they're in terrible shape, and they keep on working. This should be buried technically, but this is some pretty durable stuff considering what I do to it.
I'm trying to show social proof that I beat the shit out of this, that I know the stuff, that I've used it a lot.
So the things we're specifically testing in this video is a whole bunch of eye-to-eye slings that have a Brummel splice.
That have a Brummel splice is where I cut it off here. This is B-rolled previously. Cheat code is it's already B-rolled for you.
That have a Brummel splice. We have 3mm all the way up to 10mm. And we have
That is boring B-roll. Let me add text to that. So now look at how this looks with the text on it.
slings that have a Brummel splice. We have 3mm all the way up to 10mm.
It is timed when I set it.
And all the different sizes of slings have the same eye, about a 1.5 inch inside diameter.
You don't have to do much because I'm showing that that small one is the same as the big one, and then I'm showing how big that is.
Inside diameter. And
like that B-roll is the B-roll.
And for fun, we are going to test one of each color.
So that's the punched in thing. If you look at this, there's a whole thing that you could have picked from it. So that's what's used.
One of each color. Now we are going to begin testing these on our Slack Snap UTM.
Notice how long this was on here because I'm trying to time something else.
Testing these on our Slack Snap UTM or Universal Testing Machine that we
I had to pan all the way down to show like context.
We are building, and
building is where we moved it.
It is operated through linear actuators or a screw that moves a bar up and down. And because we have control over what speed we use on that machine, we're gonna go with 500mm per minute because that'll match close enough to what we do here on the other machine. Because once we go over 50 kilonewtons, we won't be able to use that machine and we'll have to go to the big piston. It is made from a fiber called...
This is where we come back to the original, this is the version 2 of the narrative. This was my first failed video attempt and it was all useful. So we dropped in the entire thing here and we strategically placed it in here, but we didn't have a duplicate of anything said yet. I've never brought up the UHMWPE yet.
We'll have to go to the big piston. It is made from a fiber called UHMWPE. And once they turn it into a rope, it's turned into a still not sexy name, but easier to say, HMPE rope. The brand names of this stuff would be called either Dyneema or Spectra, and we actually carry Marlowe's Dyneema.
And this is where we're going to stop, because I bet you can't guess what you should do right here.
Spectra, and we actually carry Marlowe's Dyneema, the SK78 quality.
Bet you can't guess. We'll stop right here, and you can edit the next 1 to 2 minutes. This is how I edited the next section.
The brand names of this stuff would be called either Dyneema or Spectra, and we actually carry Marlowe's Dyneema.
So I showed that I carried Marlowe's Dyneema, screenshot of the website.
The SK78 quality.
Punching in at SK78 when I say SK78.
SK99 Max, which they do.
And as soon as I say the SK99 Max,
some magic to this stuff that's already static and make it more static or more strong. And we have...
I don't have footage of factories doing that, so I'm not B-rolling it.
Pretty much all of that. But this is SK75 that we ordered.
So I'm now talking about the thing in my hand. You can tell because I'm looking at it here, showing it. And a second later, if you don't put text on the screen, it looks like I'm advertising to you. Which, I mean, I am, but...
We ordered directly from a factory, and I wanted to know how strong it is.
And that's my plug. So my entire, pitch right here is about, 2 seconds long.
Now you'll see sailors using
Now, I pulled this from, if you look at where I'm getting my footage from, it is past rolls for B-rolls. I have the sailing loops one, and I just go through it. I'm looking for, that was the only sailing footage I had. Everything else was just two dudes in a freaking room. Crap episode. But this to this... It's at least it's a sailing photo.
Now you'll see sailors using HMPE all over their boats. Slackliners use it in all sorts of rigging.
That is a great shot of that.
We have done 2 zip lines on this channel.
That was actually interesting. I did not go with the actual zip lining itself. I wanted to show, like, we had this material and just how long it is, and
Channel, the thin
I
stuff
left the audio on that clip.
lines on this channel. The thin stuff can be used as tool lanyards.
The thin stuff can be used as tool lanyards is a sentence, and that's where that's where that clip goes. You have to hear the gaps.
As tool lanyards. The really thick stuff was the perimeter of some of the space nets that we've helped build, and is the
There was too much space there for just one shot, and this shot was so cool.
build, and is the primary line in one of the rope swings coming soon.
If you don't have footage of that, you can put a fun fact, which is 270 kilonewtons. And that right there is the part that I would do. That's the last version 6 or 7 that if I'm the master of that episode, sometimes I'm not, then if I'm telling a story that I have deep knowledge of, I would be adding these things that you would have no way of knowing that, because I've had the conversations with Andy about this order. That's easy for me to add. The rest of it could be added by other people.
Swings coming soon. You'll even see HMPE as fishing line, but we've also
I did a bunch of episodes on fishing line. That's why I have footage like that.
As fishing line.
And I cut it off where I stopped saying that.
But we've also used it a ton in our brake test systems, as it's as strong as steel cable, but less scary when things go boom.
You could shoot something like that if you're at the lab, because that was I went specifically downstairs to shoot that in order for people to see what I was talking about. Plenty of things that you can go either screenshot yourself or film like I just did in order to tell a story, show the story that we're telling.
Things go boom. So the first thing I learned was that the numbers were all over the place.
So that is left on screen for about 5 to 7 seconds. And that really helps anchor people to understand where they are in the video. So we just give this whole introduction to HMPE, what it is, whatever. We're not going to show them how to splice it because, oh my God, that would be boring. Maybe near the end we will add that. We're not at that stage. But if you have lesson 1, what you would do is you would take this, hold down option, drag it over, and then you would have this, and you would type in lesson 2. Because you can see that the font is a little bit bigger than this one here, but it would anchor people to the chapters that they are going to be in. And we could even chapter the video ourselves way easier if we have these anchor points to relate to. So this is where we're going to stop here, because listen to the next one.
Numbers were all over the place for a single diameter, testing the same thing over.
Now, we just saw myself talking right here, so I need to go and show the thing that we have an absolute ton of, which is the brake test footage. And so this is where all the brake test footage gets introduced and starts to show up as the B-roll. And that's where we're going to cut off this next section. Stop watching this, go edit the next minute or 2, and then come back to this. All right, this is the introduction to the brake tests, and I won't lie, this wasn't easy, because you are telling a story as much as I am with what you show, as what I was saying.
So the first thing I learned was that the numbers were all over the place for a single diameter, testing the same thing over and over. My range was big.
See what I did there? I recycled that thing that we already had. It came from this. I just copied it, but I explained it. So there's some context, 3 samples of 3 millimeter, 6 centimeter. So
my range was bigger than I thought it was going to be.
And I had to decide when to show my range was big. I could have started it here.
My range was bigger than I thought it was going to be.
But what I did here works good. I screenshotted this. Now that you're looking at, you have access to this. I had this white originally. I made it yellow. I did not include 8, 9, and 10 because those have weird results. Plus, that's TMI. You don't want to overwhelm people, and none of this is relevant yet. So, how do I make this interesting? With the magic arrow, 10.2 to 12.96. That helps people understand that is a huge range.
Bigger than I thought it was going to be. Now, if you are
and there's a lot of information here, so be kind. leave it on the screen for 3 seconds.
Testing knots. Knots add a lot of variables into a rope, and therefore I tend to get a big range or deviation between the samples.
What's nice is the data samples, the data here is not changing. People can absorb it, but you are spoon feeding the stuff you want them to retain by having this every 3 seconds change to a new part of it that is interesting. Notice I skipped 5, only because brevity.
But the way we tested this, which I think is important to understand, is that we Brummel eye splice.
This is a general use of B-roll. I'm not showing anything specific other than we tested more, right? And in theory, I could cut out this dead space if I wanted to. I don't feel like it's entirely necessary, but I could do that. I would drag this over. You would move this over because you want that to line up back where it was. Then you would do this because this edge is lined up, and it would sound like this.
Important, which I think is important to understand, is that we Brummel eye splice.
Because it didn't take anything away from this part. But that is what I would almost consider like a version 5, tightening up an already edited video. But you are trying to make it somewhat tight.
A simple eye splice is where you just take the tail and you go straight down the center of it.
Now I gave you the this B-roll POV. I went and made it. So if you did not have this and you had access to the lab, this would be extremely helpful to do the thing I'm saying POV style, kind of at the tempo timing that you need it. But notice here is 3,653%, but I don't start with that. I show the tip of the needle.
A simple eye splice
It goes in. I could probably start speeding it up here, but it doesn't matter.
Straight down the center of it.
Now listen to the words. You hear this sentence, this, and this. These were the 4 segments. Just listen to the words.
Simple eye splice is where you just take the tail and you go straight down the center of it.
Okay, so we did that.
And if it's not under load, it could easily come out.
Showed it. That's one clip simple, okay. Words helped people understand where they are in time and space in your story.
A Brummel eye splice is where you take the opposite end and feed it through first, then you stick the tail in, and then you bury it.
So the words, and then you bury it. So you show the other end.
Where you take the
then this is sped up. This is not sped up. This is sped up. And when I punch in, you're able to see the Brummel. And you're able to see that we're pulling it tight. But we're not showing how well it's locked yet. But notice.
Then you stick the tail in, and then you bury it. And that
you could even drag that over.
And then you bury it. And that basically gives you the maximum strength that you're going to get out in the wild, having an eye to an eye.
Now that's tricky because this is a Brummel is not the maximum strength that you get. It is probably 95% of the maximum strength you're going to get, and somebody is going to comment that. But what I wanted to show, which was more important, was that we buried the tail. You still have to bury the tail. I didn't want to let people think that you got to show this, that we did the thing. Then I didn't say this. I said in my original narrative, which is why I forgot, but it's locked when not under load.
Strength that you're going to get out in the wild,
and I'm showing
an eye to an eye.
So you're kind of showing something that wasn't said that should have been said.
Whenever you use this thing. Now, sometimes they might test this things in diverters to where there's no splices and no knots, no whatever, but that's not practical for what I'm trying to learn here.
Notice that's a big section that's not B-rolled, and that's okay. Sometimes people need a brain break. It's fast-paced, slow-paced, fast-paced, just like a song here.
So after splicing them correctly and doing a proper taper, which we have an entire video on how tapers work and how...
So I have a taper video.
I have an entire video on...
I didn't have great visual of taper, but I have one killer slow-mo.
How tapers work and how important they are or are not.
This came from this script, which came from this script. But notice, I didn't put this in here. The fact these break lower is not the point. I screenshotted no tapers to tapers.
On how tapers work and how important they are or are not.
And this is on the screen for more than 1 second, 2 seconds. And hint, they are important.
Our range was still pretty big. We were getting a little bit.
Now, I wanted this on the screen sooner than later. I don't want people to think the range is very big on this, though it is. I want people to come back to the range was very big on this, so I have to show it. And then I'm going to have to leave it on the screen. And this originally was my face.
Big. We were getting a little bit more than 5% when we were testing our slings.
But it doesn't have to be. I could show this random ass test from this episode of it breaking, because this is the point. This is entertainment.
Still pretty big. We were getting a little bit more than 5% when we were testing our slings.
And what I mean by that is our deviation was. So, I mean, if your mean is only 11 and you're 1 off, I mean, that's kind of a almost 10% from the mean, not even from the edges from each other, but from the middle. So trying to explain that with words, this was the most concise I could do it.
Now, when we were brake testing our brake test machine.
Oh my God, it's going to continue.
This is a great clip. I ramped it up right here at the bottom, cut off to this just to break the narrative.
We were able to do our first experiment.
This is already time-lapsed in the other episode. I sped it up 400 more percent.
First experiment testing the speed and how much that matters. And when we pull it.
That's also time-lapsed originally from the original video. Plus I sped it up a hair, so it lined up right here. And you can't tell it's going slow, so you have to emphasize it's going slow.
Very slow.
But you want your eyes to be drawn to what I want them to look at. You don't want the text down here, and then they have to move their eyes back and forth, back and forth.
And how much that matters. And when we pull it very slowly, we get a different number. So the rate in which you pull.
That is a result from this test, or later in the video, but like a result from this video. You get a different number, and it's like nobody in this episode yet has seen the helix. No, I've not had a close-up yet. That is interesting. It helps a non-HMPE person see something interesting about HMPE.
Very slowly, we get a different number.
Different number, cut it off.
So the rate in which you pull matters.
That ending emphasis, unless it's worth having no distractions and listening to me say that.
So when I did test all these samples on the brake.
And that's it. That's this section right here. So now I'm going into the next segment of brake test. I'll move this over here.
Test all these samples on the brake test machine that's vertical.
That is where I would use the master time lapse of me doing all the 120 centimeters. And I'll see you on the next one. Edit the next minute or two, and I'll see you here. Psych, you probably overkilled this section because there's hardly any B-roll that is needed.
So when I did test all these samples on the brake test machine that's vertical.
That phrase, I have vertical footage. I did a whole bunch of samples. I'm showing that. This is also sped up 2,000%. That is after I already sped it up 1,000%.
That we did 500 millimeters per minute.
That is recycled from earlier in the video. Rarely do we do that, but this is further along in the video. It's far enough, and it shows the 500
millimeters per minute, because that is essentially the same speed I get on this horizontal brake test machine, which is stronger than that one currently.
It's nice to come back to the talking head as well, but notice I timed the stronger with the brake test,
which is stronger than that one.
And then down here is -14 volume, and I don't ramp it up because it doesn't take over the narrative
currently. But if you were to.
Now, notice there's 36 seconds here. I don't B-roll, but that's because I tell a story. If you've edited this, you already know what it says. Notice what I cut out.
Did 500 millimeter speed I get on this, which is stronger, and the big piston that we have
We already showed that.
inside of our horizontal machine
Already showed that.
in order to break the bigger diameters also goes approximately that speed.
Already showed
So
that.
between all the samples, we had the same speed.
Yeah, no shit.
But if you were to quickly pull them.
All right. We already have that because we recycled that other narrative that I pre-edited that you entered in earlier in the video. So now eliminating that,
Stronger,
because if you can B-roll something to eliminate something, you make the video more concise.
than that one currently. But if you were to quickly pull them or very slowly pull them, that can affect your numbers.
We've emphasized that in the last minute of B-roll.
Which means out in real life, you're not always going to get the number that you see, which is frustrating, that it's hard to predict how much strength you have, which is part of why you have a safety ratio. You always
So emotion, my frustration with it, you don't B-roll that.
want to have some buffer, some cash in the bank, some 3 to 1, 2 to 1, 5 to 1, 10 to 1 if you're a firefighter, right? So you want your gear to be 3 times stronger than what you're actually going to be putting on it for the things you don't know what you don't know.
I think text on the screen would just be too much because what I'm saying is so simple to understand.
What you don't know. But when you're rigging world records and pushing basically the limit of gear plus the limits of humans,
that's the prelude to what I'm about to show you. Plus, that's really cool footage of this same clip, which is from the sketchy tagline, which you can see is Andy explaining this string thing. It's some base jumping. And you don't have to watch the whole video to get the idea. Okay, so there's some base jumping. There's some cool footage earlier that day. So then I'm testing something here, and then I'm breaking it in the garage. So you understand the video. You don't have to watch the whole thing.
our safety ratios for some of the rope swings and highlines we've done were, the joke is 0.9, so it broke lower than what we actually put out in the wild.
Notice I cut that audio tighter. You can hear it.
Lines we've done were, the joke is 0.9, so it broke lower than what we actually.
So
Just for some of
Andy
the rope
explaining
swings and
something,
highlines we've done were,
him laughing. It's the laughing I'm trying to set the tone of for the emotion.
the joke
Me
is
doing
0.9,
something
so it
silly in
broke
the park.
lower.
You can tell without video that I'm nervous or whatever. Like, you can tell it's silly. And then it broke. It all reinforces this story I'm telling where we are sketchy. That's the North Star of this story.
Out in the wild, we've had a 1.9 safety ratio on some rope swings.
That's right there. I could hit Command K. Like this right here is my only statement about rope swings. So that's all I needed.
1.9 safety ratio on some rope swings, and some world records were like 1.3.
My face is funny. I have no specific B-roll. It's not Sweden. You don't want to put that on clips that are with people who were proud of their safety margin. So there's some politics in there and stuff that you have to be semi-aware of.
It's just not very high safety margin, so we actually have to know how strong this stuff is. So the second thing I learned is the difference.
Whoa. Second thing I learned? Sure looks like I need to go over here and grab that clip. Command C, Command V, change the text, and there we go. See you after you edit the next few minutes. Welcome back to lesson 2. The way I wrote this was one diameter strength to the next was random, and I left it on the screen a little bit longer because that is kind of wordy.
So the second thing I learned is the difference between one diameter and the other and what it was breaking at wasn't linear or wasn't exponential. It felt random.
I feel like the text would be on the screen too long if we had that go all the way to this edge here.
You would think that
Command L, bring, don't need any of that.
there would be a.
Otherwise, you see the edge. You could see, otherwise, you could see like my arm on the edge. So
You would think that there would be a.
now, where did I get this? Because we have several charts here. Clean summary for website. I had to add mean and the result difference. Because I don't want, if you look at my other options here, I don't want deviation anymore. It's just the mean and the difference between the means. I don't want sigma 3. I'm not talking about sigma 3. We don't care about volume or weight. It's random, right? It's not. If it was linear, then you could just talk about it. Well, is it linear off weight or is it linear off volume? So it's neither. So you do have to manipulate this a little bit. You have to make it square-ish. You have to have the information correct on this, and this might be better to do as a script, but either way, you need to have a way to tell this information. Notice it fills up my whole screen, or 99% of the screen at least. That there would be a big difference between 3 and 4 millimeter, because that's what I was talking about. Between 3 and 4 millimeter, and not that much of a difference between 9 and 10 millimeter. That would make sense. So that icon is in your folder because I used it. But the difference is kind of all over the place. And you can see how I stagger the arrows. If I'm trying to get you to look at a lot of things at once and be confused, you can see again, I used it over here. A big difference between 3 and 4 millimeter, and not that much of a difference between 9 and 10 millimeter. Which, by the way, might not even be correct, but that's my assumption. My theory was that. That would make sense. But the difference is kind of all over the place. And I was like, well, is it me? I literally already filmed this whole episode and I threw it all away. And I'm refilming this whole thing after breaking another 24 samples to get enough data in order to have something useful to share. There's so much going on the screen that it's nice to have a 10-second break to hear the guy tell the story. So then I looked at the other companies and their differences between one diameter and the next. I was tempted to have 1, 2, and 3 stack on top of each other, but I want to have Plasma and Marlowe on there longer. Could be done multiple ways, but you want to show lots of data. There's lots and lots of data. Those are the other companies. One diameter and the next. And theirs also doesn't just make perfect sense, because I think there is quite a big range, back to lesson 1, and whatever you get out of the, I don't know, what are they testing, 5 samples maybe? I did notice I left it right here a little bit longer without any crap on the screen, so you can look and appreciate at the differences. But this is funny with what timing doesn't make perfect sense, because doesn't make any sense, not just perfect sense. So as far as how that goes, I just stagger them and make sure the right thing's selected when I move it. And notice the edges are black. That's okay, because this fits in here. Notice there's no title, diameter, Marlowe, and Sampson. Where did I get that information? Well, not here. Differences of others, diameter, Marlowe, and Sampson. And I put that together. Normally that would be done in the script, but that is eliminating a lot of the noise, including arret. You don't need the arret differences because we're focusing on the other companies at this moment. Perfect sense, because I think there is quite a big range, back to lesson 1, and whatever you get out of the, I wanted to draw a little bit of attention to Sampson's. I don't know, what are they testing, 5 samples maybe? That range could be shifted in one direction or another depending on how they're doing it. There are standards that they're trying to follow. There's a parameters they're working with, but there's variables you can't account for. It's fine. It's fine to have a section like that without B-roll. Now the third lesson had the meat slide out of the sandwich. That is the third lesson. I'm going to drag that over. That is going to be our next thing. Go edit that. See you soon. So you'll notice here that I did not start with my face. I showed the thing. Now the third lesson had the meat slide out of the sandwich.
Whoa, it came unspliced!
Notice how I moved the audio. That was when my audio started. This you'll see is 264% because I wanted to show from the beginning of it starting to slide out to here. And this is single speed so people can enjoy that motion right there. The lesson 3 of 5 is off to the side. It's not going to cover this thing I want you to see, but then the arrow draws your eye to it. probably 1 second in. And the reason we can do this is because it's my face. It's totally fine to start showing some stuff here.
Now, the third lesson had the meat slide out of the sandwich.
Whoa, it came unspliced!
It also has the force right here.
Like I said,
There's so much to unpack there if you're the audience.
the Brummel lock doesn't lock it when it's loaded. It locks it when it's not loaded.
Notice how much of this is not B-rolled.
When it's loose, the stuff has to be very deep enough for not friction to hold it, but this polygon shape that it creates when it becomes rock hard under tension, and it actually turns into like this key and a lock. It's not friction that's holding this thing, but you have to have enough of those keys and locks holding it in place to overcome the lack of friction. And so if it's not buried enough, it slips out.
So right here,
And so if it's not buried enough, it slips out.
I punched in. You can see about 19%. And your eyes need to be lined up near where your eyes are because you're looking at the eyes, and then it needs to be at least in the same ballpark. But punch in for that final point to give the audience a break from what I'm about to do to their brain.
Even if it's brummeled. Now, we have 60-centimeter slings.
Now, I'm saying you need to, the 60-meter sling can only be buried enough, but I want to emphasize that in this brake test that's slipping. But the problem is to make it this short, you can only bury it so much.
Now, we have 60-centimeter slings that can only be buried so much before the tails are touching. And so I wanted to...
Now, in a perfect world, I'd probably time the words to about right there. But I timed it with what I said right here.
Slings that can only be buried so much before the tails are touching.
Because the break's happening mid-sentence? It could go either way on that one.
And so I wanted to know if those were super good enough, and they were.
And they were.
Until you got to 8 millimeters.
So let this brake test this is really interesting. Just let it cook for a while.
The meat basically slid out of the sandwich, but albeit pretty high force. It's just not full strength.
But albeit at pretty high force, just not full strength, is a thought and a concept in a sentence. And that's where it is nice to do something different on the screen, which emphasizes what this is doing. And it did actually kind of half break when I look at it now. It broke and then slid out, but it's still lower force.
Not full strength. But what's crazy to me is that they sometimes held. So essentially we're getting full strength if it held. That's not good.
All right. That screenshot is... I fought this thing so much to get this. Anyways, that screenshot is here. I moved this up in order to help people understand what this is for. But the 60, 60, and 60 are kind of spitter-spattered in between here. But this is all the samples. And the bold means slipped out, didn't break. So you kind of have to make that spreadsheet usable.
Strength. But what's crazy to me is that they sometimes held.
Now, I was tempted to show that they sometimes held full strength, but I really want people to see 60, 60, 60.
Held. So essentially we're getting full strength if it held.
These were full strength. This on its own, with the sound off, you would understand what's going on.
That's not good.
You got to break up that much data if there's a joke or something.
So the length of bury you're supposed to have is...
You can see that these are 4 seconds long, that you have the bold, bold, bold. This arrow doesn't really cover up that number, but these slipped at a high force.
Times the diameter. So if you have a 10 millimeter diameter here, you need 600 millimeters of bury.
And I did 5 millimeter and 10 millimeter so you understand the concept before I...
And so you can have 60 centimeter slings.
Show you the whole chart that I forced ChatGPT into including this, because the eye and the taper requires an extra 3 inches on both sides. And minimum sling length in centimeters, not millimeters, because that was weird. The bury length times 2. Like, there's a lot of good information here, and it's in imperial and metric, including over here. So that is available in your B-roll. Now listen to what I say while I show that bury requirement.
Bury. And so you can have 60 centimeter slings up to a certain diameter. But once it's fat enough, it has to be buried deeper and longer.
I was tempted to put an arrow, but I didn't because your minimum sling length can only be 60 centimeter up to 4 millimeters. And I want people to have to discover that for themselves because it's good all the way up to here.
It's interesting that sometimes,
and I emphasize that with one of the break tests that did hold full strength and expressed that it was only a 15x berry, which ChatGPT was able to decipher for me because it's only a 7-inch berry, which you could see on the product page if you needed to research this and find out in order to write this in here. It's technically was available to you before you made this.
but once it's fat enough, it has to be buried deeper and longer. It's interesting that sometimes it helped and it wasn't consistent.
Threw the number on the screen when it broke.
I guess that's the theme of the whole video. It is nice to see, though, if you do bury it properly and taper it properly, that you do get super consistent enough.
Now, fun fact, I cut all these entire scenes out. When you're B-rolling, you can cut out entire sections that you were able to express with your B-roll. I cut this out.
In the 10 millimeter, when tested in the full length slings, 120 centimeter slings, that we got a mean of 82 kilonewtons. But when we tested it in the 60 centimeter, we had the meat slide out of the sandwich at 73 kilonewtons, got full
I've already showed all this. All this information has been conveyed.
strength at 79, and then meat slid out at 64, and then again, full strength at 83. So
Shit, that's boring.
I do think the deviation is about 5-ish%. And if I look at the other numbers from the other companies, I think it's about that much.
Oh, don't get into deviations. Oh God, you don't have enough time to give context for deviations, to explain what a deviation is to just a guy trying to poop on the toilet, trying to watch this to be entertained. And he doesn't even know why he's watching an HMPE video because he's not even into HMPE. We got to keep it interesting. So if I close this up right here, the transition is
super consistent enough. And that leads me to my fourth lesson. What the hell is ABS, average braking strength?
So that is the next section that you can edit. All right, lesson 4.
And that leads me to my fourth lesson. What the hell is ABS?
I wanted to say average braking strength here. I wanted to spell it out, but the WTF is ABS. It was you got to, ideally that's written in the script, but if it's not, you are telling the story as the editor, so good luck.
Average braking strength. That is a common number you'll see with HMPE and Dyneema products out there. They have an average braking strength.
Now, I am providing a lot of these B-roll screenshots for you in this. I don't feel it's nearly as hard for you to edit this as it was for me to go find all of those. I typed in ChatGPT to help me find this one. I already had this one and this one. Cortland only has the minimum. So it's like you really kind of got to know the topic, which is why the script writer really needs to be the one who provides all this. But if they don't, you gotta go find it all.
Average braking strength. That is a common number you'll see with HMPE and Dyneema products out there. They have an average braking strength.
So I kind of said it 2 different ways, which give me enough screen time to show the 3 different scenes, but I definitely had the arrow the whole time. I didn't do this, right?
Dyneema products out there.
Right. I want you to see each one over and over. Anyways.
Braking strength. I'm actually really familiar with average braking strength being one of the numbers that you look at on these spreadsheets.
That just show me talking.
And for this stuff, you can look at the mean, which is the average braking strength.
Now, this is nice, clean numbers. That's why I picked the 3 through 7 millimeter, and I'm hiding the ones that are weird because I talk about them later. And I, by the way, cut out a whole bunch of stuff. So if yours still has narrative that I cut out, pay attention to that. I forget where I cut it. I cut it a lot.
Not helpful. Let me explain to you why that's so frustrating, because what you're used to seeing on a carabiner, for example,
showing the carabiner,
is 22 kilonewtons, and that's the MBS. That's a minimum braking strength done from 3.
I held the camera still enough intentionally so you could just hold the arrow there instead of freeze framing this, but you can't put it on until I'm done moving it to about right there. And
that's a minimum.
Then I say 22, but it's 23. Does not matter. It's a carabiner. That's the point.
That's a minimum braking.
It almost tells the story that carabiners can be more than 22.
Strength done from 3 sigma calculation.
I'm not trying to have people read that. I am trying to show them hard math is coming. And by the way, I got that through having to type it out because that character right there does not work with the Premiere fonts that are out there. And so I tried and tried, the different fonts would not work. So I just screenshotted my own thing because I didn't want to screenshot it directly from ChatGPT because I don't want too much ChatGPT on here. And it was more wordy than I wanted it to be. I just wanted it to be mean and standard deviation. I could have written out, I could have written this formula, but I want to look smart to the people who know this stuff.
From 3 Sigma calculations. Let's say you have 5 samples and you want to calculate a 99% chance that it'll never break below a certain number. It's going to be below, obviously, all of those numbers, but if you have a huge range in between them, if there's a lot of deviation, it's that MBS is going to be much further down.
I had to show the arrow here because I clicked this in order to get rid of the formula, but watch that several times. Notice the words, notice the words, notice, well, I mean, I could, yep, nope, that's great. Check the spelling, mean minus 3 times deviation, mean minus 3 times the deviation.
It's that MBS is going to be much further down. If you actually looked at where the slings slipped out of the sandwich, the MBS is really, really low in order to provide that certainty.
Notice the words. It's very specific to what you're pointing at because you have this space to work with. If you have words up here and here, your eyes would have to do both and look at the arrow. It needs to be fairly simple. And if you look, we have a 3-second window to do all that.
Further down. If you actually looked at where the slings slipped out of the sandwich, the MBS is really, really low in order to provide that certainty.
There's a lot of info there, so I didn't move the arrow up to this right here because you can just look. You can see that this number is higher and this number is higher, and I said it here.
In order to provide that certainty. So it's much lower than just even the lowest number that you get.
So if I'm going to summarize all that, it's nice to just show me saying it.
So that leads me to another frustrating number is, can I rely on minimum strength off of these spreadsheets that you get?
That one is the Cortland plasma one. They didn't have the average. They only had minimum, which works out here. But notice how much I punched in from the screenshot that you have available to you. But I kept the text the same. And I had to move the arrow, like I had to pivot the arrow because you couldn't really tell from that to that if I just moved it to the right a little. So it really emphasizes there's 2 different things.
Get with these products, because I kind of want to have an MBS based on 3 Sigma, based on what I do with all my gear. And I do want to kick this horse as I go by. 3 Sigma math, MBS, woo, is the worst number you're going to get in the best case scenario you use the gear. Also not helpful, but...
So I have the words on the screen from when I start to say it to not helpful.
I just
because
I
want to
emphasize that as
it.
I go by. But we're not even getting that number. I think we're just getting the minimum and the average. I think with this product, the deviation's too big. So if you actually did...
My conspiracy theory rant.
They all need to mark it that way. So then do I market this that way? Well, what I'm trying to do here is show you all my numbers and all the math so you can make all the decisions you need to.
What I did is I unhid all the columns. The predictive ones did not need to be on there because that's just lesson 5. But this shows the nice clean 120 because those are mostly properly buried. The other ones are not. So the MBS is unhelpful because you're not supposed to even have those. And it's very clear right here. It's 120. How much bigger is it? It includes the weight. I unhid everything. So it shows that I'm showing a bunch and it has your little fancy math down here. So it looks like, you know, we tried. But that's the thing. And then we...
5th lesson I learned.
Are now on to the 5th one. Go edit that one. Last section. Lesson 505. How to predict strength.
5th lesson I learned is how I can maybe predict what a breaking strength is. I wanted to see if I could figure out what the number would be before I actually pulled on the sample, which was a fun game, but you obviously can't do it off.
Take a look at what I have here as a blank slate. Okay, that's the one. I'm giving these charts to you guys. So it's the prediction one, but it's based on volume, based on weight, volume, weight. Okay, and the mean is very important. You have to know how much the bigger one is. This is all relevant to it now. Now watch what I do with all these arrows, because I want to explain
off of the diameter, because you just go from 4 to 5 millimeter, but you should maybe go off volume. I thought the theoretical volume between 3 and 4 millimeters should that difference be the difference you get between the mean breaking strength and the next mean breaking strength.
Let's run through that one more time. Let's expand this though.
But you obviously can't do it off of the diameter, because you just go from 4 to 5 millimeter.
So that just shows the two columns.
But you should maybe go off volume. I thought
so that's where I'm getting those numbers from. And now we're going to compare the based on volume prediction off the mean. And so the words down here, these were way off. They are.
Theoretical volume between 3 and 4 millimeters should that difference.
I had to analyze this, right? This, in theory, should be analyzed as we script. But these were close.
Be the difference you get between the...
And then there are three numbers that were spot on. And I didn't realize this when I said all this, which would have been nice if it was scripted like this. A lot more research should and could have been done before we started filming this, which would just be making this edit so much faster, which is why we say a ounce of preparation is worth a pound of editing. But this is how you would solve that.
Mean breaking strength and the next mean breaking strength. Because if you go off MBS, you're taking deviations into consideration, and that's not helpful. Mean to mean, from volume to volume.
See how I cut this tighter? I did cut stuff out. I went on a rabbit somewhere and I cut out a bunch.
Actually did not give me the numbers the best way. So we kind of did it off of weight, because this is hollow.
Because this is hollow, like that's a point, right? And then we're going to get into weight. But I talk slow because I'm just data dumping on you, and I'm trying to give people a chance to catch up. So you can see here I have a couple less arrows than I do the other way. And it looks like this the whole time, where I show a different chart where it's prediction based on just the weight. So you don't have all that other noise inside of the screenshot. And then I tell you in words what you're looking at. These are closer together. And I leave it on the screen long enough for you to be able to go and read that. When you're editing, you read it in single speed. You read each one to see if you can go all the way down and get what we want them to get. Allow enough time.
Hollow. How much material is in this? And if you do it off of weight, I think worked close enough. So if I wanted to calculate what 11 millimeter would be in this stuff, I think I can do it.
It's just, I don't want to just flash arrows all the way down, because there's nothing specific to look at other than they were spot on. And I don't want to highlight this difference right here, because all the other numbers are just so close. It's just, the point is, this was closer than the volume.
Do it. Why I want to predict this is my buddy just ordered 20 millimeter or 3/4 inch from us.
This does not need to say the exclamation mark. Oh, by the way, if you ever get a black square like this because you click that arrow and you have this black square there, Command Z it, and then click fit. And
is my buddy just ordered 20 millimeter or 3/4 inch from us.
Now, I didn't show my math. And remember, we got this number from earlier in the video. This is the number that I'd put on the screen. This is something you probably wouldn't put on the screen. I'm stealing the grams per meter off of other people and then calculating it based on our thing. So, like, I don't want to show all that math. People can just believe me. I've shown enough nerdy shit that people would just believe that I did my math. And I did. I just don't want to show it.
That will be arriving soon, and I don't even know if I could break it. So it's nice to be able to predict what it will break at just by being able to weigh it. And if you want to order a specific color that we don't have, or a specific diameter that we don't have, regardless of size,
Read that very carefully. That is the most concise way I can say those things. Best prices, what we have, what we can get. And I spaced it out because I want best price. Man, you put 3 lines with that many words, too much to read. Having a little separation is visually easier to read.
We can get that to you within 4 to 6 weeks. So the conclusion is if you bury it 45 times the diameter.
We're wrapping it up. I'm only leaving this on the screen. I'm not putting arrows, and I'm leaving it on the whole time. There's so much that's had gone on.
Diameter or bigger, ideally 60 or bigger if you really want to guarantee it won't slip.
Let me make sure you understand, like, what I'm saying is gnarly, right?
Conclusion is if you bury it 45 times the diameter.
That is not what anybody recommends, but it's based on my math here, because if you go back to the chart that I got ChatGPT to write me, it technically says only 4 or 5 millimeters is buried deep enough in the 60 centimeter ones, right? So like I'm making a strong statement there, but I don't want to put on words on screen.
Times the diameter or bigger, ideally 60 or bigger if you really want to guarantee it won't slip out.
Me covering my ass.
You taper it super good enough that you're going to get these numbers.
When I'm going like this on the screen, going like, you get these numbers, probably likely covering my hands up with the numbers.
And you can go off of the mean, you can go off the minimum, or you can go off the sigma 3 minimum breaking strength.
Now, I don't have a minimum. Otherwise, I'd go arrow, minimum, 3 sigma. I don't have a minimum. They can just look at what the minimum is. That's why I didn't do that.
And you can make that decision for yourself, but knowing this stuff will help me be as sketchy as possible while still being able to live to tell the tale.
And I put that logo about that size at the very end of it. It's called the BGF logo 2025. It's in the B-roll things, just so you have all the material. And I put this on here for 7 seconds because I did not put, but if you want to see how tapers hold up, you can go check out this video next. And then you cut to some audio from that other video, and then it goes to this screen. And so you don't have to leave it on the screen this long when you have footage from the episode itself, because the whole thing is going to have that ending screen that you can click. This one does not have that. It's a hard ending you probably don't expect, because I don't even, like, it's a conclusion, but I don't drag it on. And so I do a 7 second instead of a 3 or 5. And this is a really hard B-roll. So if you struggle with this, that would make sense. Now, this was only version 5 or 6, depending on how we break out our versions later. This is specifically just B-roll. Now, I'm going to go back and I'm going to detail the crap out of this after all that. And I might film that, or at least explain the difference like I did in this video between what you see here and the final version. And that is what I would call like a final version that I go through. And that is what I would be editing. So I maintain the flavor of the channel. I have the final green checkbox that everything that's going out on the internet passes a certain quality. And this would go through a couple quality checkers before I would even see it. So that is the dream of having a larger media team and more people who know how to do this. And if you're watching and you're not part of our team, this is the process in which we are trying to set the foundation to training more people on our team to be able to do more things. Thanks for watching.